Chapter 571, Someone from the Wrong Family. There was a beauty called Dim Beauty. Although the shelter of doors and windows made the indoor scene unable to be seen clearly, it promoted the feeling of heartbeat acceleration. Xian was a goddess-level beauty. Her pretty face fascinated countless men and made her their dream. Such a beautiful woman was now riding on Zhang Han's body, and sometimes she even bowed her head to make a few jokes. In addition to his physical happiness, Zhang Han also felt the pleasure of aggression and conquest. After a long time, the continuous sound in the second bedroom gradually stopped. After more than 10 minutes, the sound came out in the bathroom. Then Zhang Han and Xian put on their pajamas and went back to the master bedroom, cuddling and falling asleep. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Meng woke up first, sat up in a daze, rubbed her eyes and mumbled, "Papa, Mama, I want to go pee." "Okay." Zhang Han jumped up and rushed to the lavatory with Meng in his arms. When they got back to bed, Xian was already awake, squinting her beautiful big eyes in a daze. Mama is the last one to get up again. Meng soon woke up completely, climbed to the bed and got into the quilt. She stretched out her little hand and took Xian's long hair, with which she began to draw a circle on Xian's face. "Mama, get up. Grandfather Sun is shining on your butt. Wait for a while, give me a hug first." Xian stretched out her right arm and held Meng in her arms. Then they played on the bed for a while. "I'm going to make breakfast." Zhang Han put on his clothes and went to the kitchen. There were some ingredients stored in Zhang Han's space ring. Although the hotel suite had a stove and a whole set of kitchenware, Zhang Han did not use them, but took out his own kitchenware from the space ring. He filled half the pot with water and began to heat it. When the water was boiling, he took out a basin and put flour in it, filled it with water, and began to mix flour regularly. Soon, he got a big dough. A few minutes later, the water boiled. Zhang Han grabbed the two sides of the dough, pulled it, and then began to shake it back and forth. After the dough was gradually elongated, Zhang Han pulled a small piece of dough from it, and then repeated the previous process. That was, grabbing the two sides of the long dough and continuing to pull the noodles until they became slightly thinner than chopsticks. Finally, he put the noodles into the pot. At this time, the voices of Xian and Meng came from behind him. "Look, Papa is making breakfast for us. Wow, Papa, you are great. My Papa is the greatest." Zhang Han looked back at his wife and daughter, who had just cleaned themselves, and smiled. "Go to pack something, we will have breakfast in 10 minutes. After breakfast, we are going to, I forget it." Meng looked up at Xian. "We are going to the 8th weekday town." Xian replied, "Well, what day is the 8th weekday?" Meng asked curiously. "The 8th weekday doesn't exist, it's just a town's name." Xian explained. "The first weekday, Monday in Chinese, similarly hereinafter, the second weekday, the third weekday, the fourth weekday, the fifth weekday, the sixth weekday and the seventh weekday. We call it Sunday instead of the seventh weekday. Why don't we continue to name it with numbers?" Meng asked. It was hard for Xian, as if she was asked why 1 + 1 = 2. Luckily, Zhang Han gave his answer. "I remember a version. 7 days a week are named after 7 stars worshipped by the ancients. They are Sun, Moon, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. Moon Day is Monday, Mars Day is Tuesday, and Wednesday to Saturday are named after Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Sunday is Sunday." Zhang Han explained to Meng and Xian at the same time. Xian blinked her eyes, chuckled and looked at Meng. "Do you understand the origin of Sunday? Mama, let's go pack up." Meng didn't understand. She quickly changed the topic and pulled Xian to go to the sofa for dressing. When they began to prepare, Zhang Han slowed down his cooking according to their speed. He cooked the noodles and put them in another pot of cold water for a short time to make them taste better. Then he warmed the milk, boiled the eggs, and fried a plate of okra and a plate of mushroom and oatmeal. At this time, Zhang Han saw that Xian and Meng Meng were about to be dressed up, so he took out the sausage made of Hungarian sheep pig and made fried noodles with them. "Let's have breakfast." Meng Meng smelled the food and ran to the restaurant cheering. Xian followed them and went to the restaurant for a nutritious breakfast. After a few minutes' rest, the family of 3 left the hotel. In the morning, they would take Meng Meng to visit the 8th weekday town. The 8th weekday town's main theme was to let children experience adults' life, which was a kind of special play with the nature of learning and experiencing. Today, there were only the 3 of them who went there for fun. When they arrived at the town, Meng Meng was very happy, and she looked at every new thing carefully. "What's that? What's this?" In the small town, e-coins were used for consumption, which could be exchanged in the local bank. Zhang Han and Xian took Meng Meng to visit various characteristic venues. In the aviation hall, Meng Meng put on the special guard clothes, and together with several other children, followed the staff to salute the side. "Nice to meet you, welcome to." In addition to the aviation hall, there were also news hall, F1 racing hall, hospital, beverage filling plant and other places to experience. Although the town was not better than the playground in terms of entertainment or stimulation, it enriched the experience of Meng Meng. At about 11 o'clock, Zhang Han was driving a Mercedes-Benz, and Xian and Meng Meng were humming songs together in the back seat. Xian always sang softly in a pleasant voice. Meng Meng inherited Xian's excellent genes, and her tender singing was very pleasant, which was enjoyed by Zhang Han. After returning to the hotel, Xian went to Ruxin Hotel with Zif. There was something wrong with the venue of the New Year's party in the TV station, so Ma Dafang arranged today's rehearsal on the 11th floor of Ruxin Hotel. The hotel was very close to Lin Hai TV station and was used as accommodation for the party participants. There were a lot of participants, not only some singers, but also movie stars singing across the border, crosstalk performers, art and magic performers, dance troupes, art troupes, martial arts troupes and so on. In total, 6 floors of the hotel were taken by them, from the 8th floor to the 13th floor. The rehearsal was on the 11th floor and would not affect other customers. After Xian arrived at Ruxin Hotel, she was arranged by the staff to take the staff elevator upstairs from the side. In addition to Zif, Xian was accompanied by Zhao Feng, Leng Yi, Liang Hao, Liang Menkai, and 2 other members of the security group. They entered the corridor from the side, where the light was brighter, but the big round hall in the center was darker, and all the curtains were pulled up. Xian took off her sunglasses. Today, she was wearing a purple dress, necklace, and earrings from Zhang Han, which matched her black wavy hair and made her elegant. There were so many people in the hall coming and going. There was no sofa, but some simple small chairs with backs. After seeing Xian, many people looked at her and even cried out, "She is coming! Xian is coming! Wow! She is so pretty. My goodness, I like her very much. I want to ask for her autograph. What can I do? I'm so nervous. She is gorgeous." These were basically people from the art troupes at the party, not the stars. They were all fans of Xian. The other famous stars greeted Xian one after another. "Hello, Miss Z. Long time no see, Xian." Xian remembered the names of most of the stars here. Even if she forgot someone's name, she could quickly recall them after watching the program list. Xian's extraordinary retentive memory helped her to respond to everyone's greetings calmly and politely. The people in the hall began to surround Xian like the satellites of the Earth, making her the focus of the whole hall. "Xian, you are here." Ma Dafang walked quickly towards Xian from the side, with a little sweat on his forehead. Obviously he was so busy now. "The room can be used for rest. Would you like to go there, sit for a while and come back when it's your turn to perform?" asked Ma Dafang. "Well, no, thanks. It's fine with me to sit here." Xian smiled and replied, "Haha, okay, sit here. There's water and cold drinks on the table on the right." Ma Dafang led Xian, Zif, and others to the first row seats. Zhao Feng and Leng Yi, as well as 2 other members of the security group, were standing by, and Liang Hao was also standing at will near them. They didn't go to join the party. There were 13 rows of chairs in the hall for the crowd. The back row was basically full, and there were many people standing on both sides of the rows. Some chairs in the front row were empty, and there were few famous stars like Xian there. After seeing Xian sitting down, many people in the back began to discuss. Although Xian is a big star, she is still modest, unlike Wang Xingxin. There was no arrangement in the room on the right before, but there was some popular star who came here, didn't sit down, and even expressed dissatisfaction with Ma Dafang, so they arranged the room urgently for them to rest. The first arrogant star here was Wang Xingxin, and then more than 10 people went there to take a rest after her. A few minutes later, at 1 o'clock, the host came on stage and began the simulation rehearsal. It was busy here. On the other side, Peninsula Hotel. 3 Bentley parked in the hotel parking lot. Bang, bang, bang. A total of 5 people got out of the cars amid the sounds of opening and closing the doors. Among them were Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin. The other 3, all looking over 50 years old, were 2 men and 1 woman. The elder man with a flat-top haircut and some pockmarks on his face was Rong Sheng, the eldest brother of Rong Jiaxin. Beside him, the gorgeous and elegant woman was his wife. The man with a thin face and calm expression was Rong Yong, a government officer. Eldest brother and second brother, let's go straight up. Han and Li are on the 9th floor. Rong Jiaxin said while taking lead to enter the hotel. Let's go and have a look. Last time we saw them, they were only 4 or 5 years old. 20 years passed in a flash. Rong Sheng sighed. Time passed quickly and Zhang Han got married, but his parents haven't come back yet. Rong Sheng's wife shook her head. Rong Yong didn't say anything and followed them silently. Wang Ming smiled when he saw this. The 3 of them were ordinary people who didn't get in contact with the martial arts world, and they were not co-members of the Rong family. Wang Ming sighed because he felt that they were similar to him in the past. They will know how respectable and powerful Han is. At that time, their expression will be very interesting. I heard that Jiali and Zhang Guangyi went to his mysterious place to avoid disasters. Before entering the hotel, Rong Yong finally opened his mouth and said something that was not worthy of hearing. They don't even care about their children. It's really, Rong Yong expressed his dissatisfaction with a light smile. It could be seen that he was dissatisfied with Zhang Guangyi. Rong Jiaxin shook her head helplessly when she saw this. Second brother, didn't I say that Han's life is very good except that his parents haven't been found yet, and he is super powerful? That's good. Rong Yong said with no emotion, and then stopped talking. Rong Sheng and his wife looked at each other and smiled softly. They were familiar with Rong Yong's temper. Although they were not the co-members of the family, they were also the senior managers of the family company, who were definitely rich people in the eyes of ordinary people. Though they were not very rich, they lived a comfortable life and had no plans to compete for fame and wealth. Compared with Rong Yong, who struggled in the officialdom, their life was more relaxing and freer. Therefore, they welcomed the arrival of Zhang Han and his sister. At the same time, these 2 uncles of Zhang Han were among the few supporters of Rong Jiali and Zhang Guangyi at the beginning. They got on the elevator and reached the 9th floor. Rong Jiaxin led the way to Zhang Han's room on the inside. After she knocked, the door was soon opened by Zhang Li. "Aunt, you are here." Zhang Li smiled and said hello. Then she looked curiously at the other 3 people, including Rong Sheng. She didn't say hello to them, because she also forgot which one was the eldest uncle. "Yes, we are here." Rong Jiaxin responded and changed her shoes at the door. During the period, the other 3 people looked inside. There was a handsome man sitting on the sofa, and beside him was a beautiful girl who looked at them curiously. They must be Zhang Han and his daughter. After changing their shoes, they walked to the inner side under the guidance of Rong Jiaxin. Zhang Han also picked up Meng Meng and walked to this side. Han, Li. Wang takes an initiative to introduce them. Do you still remember them? This is my eldest brother and sister-in-law, and this is my second brother. Nice to meet you, eldest uncle, aunt and second uncle. Both Zhang Han and Zhang Li nodded to greet them. Well, sit down. Please, what a beautiful girl. Rong Sheng's wife said with a smile. Han is handsome and Li is very beautiful, it's really nice. Rong Sheng also praised them. Rong Yong was as expressionless as before, and he just nodded and replied good. After all of them sat down, Rong Sheng's wife sat beside Zhang Li, looked inwards at Meng Meng and asked with a smile, "What's your name?" "My name is Zhang Yumeng, and everyone calls me Meng Meng." Meng Meng replied, blinking her big eyes. Before contacting Zhang Han, Meng Meng was a little timid, because she hadn't seen many strangers before. After returning to Zhang Han's side, there were more and more people around her. Although Meng Meng was still shy, she was not afraid of greeting the others now. Rong Sheng and his wife's eyes were lit up, Rong Yong's eyes flickered slightly, and he was very pleased with Meng Meng's appearance. "Meng Meng, why are you so beautiful?" asked Jie Wai, Rong Sheng's wife. "Well, my papa is handsome, and my mama is pretty, so I'm beautiful." Zhang Han was amused by Meng Meng's words. Ha ha ha. Jie Wai covered her mouth and smiled, saying, "Do you know who I am? Who are you?" Meng Meng was stunned and looked at Zhang Han with her clear eyes. "This is our first meeting, how do I know who you are?" "She is your grandma-in-law, and they were both your grandpa-in-law." Zhang Han introduced the strangers to Meng Meng. Mmm. Meng Meng leaned her little head on Zhang Han's arm and said shyly, "Nice to meet you, Grandma and Grandpa." "Well, ha ha." Rong Sheng's eyes almost turned green. "This lovely little girl is so enviable. Alas, my son who doesn't strive for success is almost 32, he's not married yet, I'm very worried about him every day." As he said this, Rong Sheng seemed to gnash his teeth, but he quickly realized it and grinned again. It's nice for Han to have something to do. Rong Sheng gave Zhang Han a gesture of praise and said, "If Jiali and Guangyu see their granddaughter, they will be overjoyed. It's great. Yes, I want a granddaughter, so I can play with her every day. Unlike you, it's hard to see you." Jie also shook her head. The two of them laughed a few times. At this time, Rong Yong beside opened his mouth for the first time. "Isn't Meng Meng's mother here?" "Of course, my sister-in-law is here. She's just busy working, she can't come back until evening." Zhang Li shook her head and replied, "She went to work." Rong Sheng was slightly shocked. The new year is coming and she is still working. Is she running a company or? "Gee, my mama is a big star." Meng Meng nestled beside Zhang Han and explained. "A star?" Rong Yong frowned a little, looked at Meng Meng for 2 seconds, then Zhang Han for 2 seconds, and finally said, "If the Zhang family know you married a star, it's hard for them to recognize your wife." But, Zhang Han didn't wait for Rong Yong's but, he waved directly and interrupted Rong Yong. "I'm not a member of the Zhang family now, and I don't need other people's approval to marry anyone." Rong Yong's mouth twitched and he was speechless. Although his expression did not change, he felt something a little strange. Generally, young people were a little timid when facing him, which was related to his serious face, but Zhang Han didn't care about him at all. It's a good young man. Although Rong Yong choked so much that he couldn't speak, he was admiring Zhang Han silently. At the same time, the wordless Rong Yong and Zhang Han's slightly blunt words made the atmosphere a little awkward. Rong Sheng looked at Rong Yong and laughed. "Second brother, what's wrong with the stars? Your girl still dreams of being a star. It's not good to have such ambiguity when you are in the official arena." "Yes." Jie also rolled her eyes at Rong Yong and said, "Don't pretend here, there are no outsiders here, aren't you tired?" In an instant, the corner of Rong Yong's mouth quivered slightly. "Well, I just said a word and was attacked by the group." He finally smiled. shook his head and said, I don't have any ambiguity, just guess whether the Zhang family will be like that. Jiawai smiled softly, then looked at Meng Meng and asked, what's your mother's name? It's a big star, maybe we know each other. My mama is Xian. Meng Meng replied, pouting her small mouth. Who, Xian? Jiawai's expression suddenly froze as she was about to say something. Finally, she couldn't help saying, I really know her. I just saw the Chinese New Voice a few days ago. She sings very well, but she's so beautiful. There will always be people pursuing her in the program. There was a duet plot in the program. She saw Xian holding hands with that man in the big sunglasses, and her face was full of happiness. She was a woman, and she could see it. At that time, she thought it was sweet, but now when she heard that Xian was Zhang Han's wife, she thought it was not sweet but a little inappropriate. Auntie, the man who pursued Xian that day is my brother. Don't you recognize him? Zhang Li said with a smile. He is your brother? Rong Sheng and the other two were stunned again, and they began carefully looking at Zhang Han. After hearing your explanation, I feel it's true. Ouch, that's Han. Rong Sheng said unexpectedly, I couldn't recognize you when your hair was arranged or something in the program. Yes. Jiawai covered her mouth and smiled. I'm shocked by the truth. I like Xian very much, and I thought she tried to find a boyfriend through singing in the program. Unexpectedly, that was Han. Ha ha. No wonder Meng Meng is so cute and beautiful. It turns out that her mother is very beautiful. Well, my papa is handsome. Meng Meng added. You can't leave my father alone. Then they talked for a while. Zhang Han looked at Rong Yong and asked casually, which position is second uncle at? Well. Rong Yong's face changed. Rong Jiaxin answered the question for him. Your second uncle is a section chief now. Section chief? Zhang Li's facial expression froze. Even Zhang Han's mouth could not help shivering. Such a great official prestige. I thought that he was at least a backbone member like minister or director. Your second uncle was a deputy minister the year before last, and he was expected to be promoted to minister this year. But he was demoted to section chief for some reason. During the chat, Zhang Han learned something about these relatives. Rong Sheng and Jiawai had a son who was doing easy work and liked playing. Rong Yong had a daughter. It could also be seen from their situation that they were still some distance away from the core of the Rong family. They were here to wait for Xian to come back in the evening. Xian should have come back before 3 o'clock, but she was in a bit of trouble. On the 11th floor of Ruxin Hotel, Xian was singing on the stage. The happy melody and her sweet voice sound made so many people drunk. There were several unexpected guests standing nearby. Xian is so beautiful, it's romantic to be a ghost under the peony. I don't want her to leave this hotel. Ningxi Ocean stared at Xian greedily. At the same time, he was also observing the two men beside him. Gu Peng and Gu Shui were the sons of the patriarch of the Gu family. They were twin dandies and much more powerful than Ningxi Ocean. What was more important was that Ningxi Ocean had heard about them, that the two brothers liked to share one woman. Xian was so beautiful and they should not give up. The high position of the Gu family gave them the life of the local emperor and the courage to be not afraid of anyone. They didn't contact the martial arts world, and they didn't know who Xian's husband was. Ningxi Ocean with a heavy burden wanted to murder Zhang Han with a borrowed knife. But after he said this, he found that Gu Peng and Gu Shui around him didn't move at all. So he again exclaimed, she is so beautiful, it's beyond my imagination if I can hold her in my arms and taste her. The most important thing is her face. I have a physiological reaction. Ningxi Ocean murmured in a low voice. Soon, Xian finished the song. After winning a round of intense applause, Xian nodded to the crowd and walked to the side with several people around her. Why don't they take action? Ningxi Ocean looked at the two people in the front right side and took 2 steps forward. He found that Gu Peng's eyes were dull and Gu Shui's mouth was drooling. Damn, it turned out that they were stunned by Xian's beauty. Chapter 572, Murdering Someone with a Borrowed Knife. Damn it. Ningxi Ocean suddenly scolded, seeing that he had attracted the attention of the Ge brothers. He turned to a middle-aged man and said, "Uncle Zh, let's go downstairs and stop Xian. She is the best in the world, and I must get her at any cost. It's not very good to be in full view of the public. There are so many staff members of the TV station in Ruxin Hotel." The middle-aged man behind him replied and frowned. "Shall we not be here? We can take her to the villa, and I'll do anything with her at my will. Let's go," Ningxi Ocean said as he walked to the back elevator. Before he took the first step, he turned around to apologize to Ge brothers. "I'm sorry, Brother Ge Peng and Ge Shuai, I'm going to solve my personal affairs. Please forgive me for leaving first." Instead of giving Ge brothers time to respond, Ningxi Ocean ran forward with a high speed, as if he would never see Xian if he was late. Uncle Zh, the middle-aged man, though seemingly lowly, was walking steadily and quickly behind Ningxi Ocean. But the two men, without exception, were all focused on the back. Ge Shuai swallowed his saliva and looked anxiously at Ge Peng. "Brother, are we going to let him take over the beauty like this, under our noses?" Ge Peng had a bit of trouble, but we didn't bring anyone with us, and we can't defeat him. Damn it, dare Ningxi Ocean fight against us? Ge Shuai scolded, and then said, "It's a good chance not to come again. Although it's like that, we didn't take any people with us, we can't stop Xian." Ge Peng frowned. He was calmer than Ge Shuai. After thinking about it, he hesitated and said, "The other chances are still available. The New Year's party hasn't started, and maybe we can bring someone with us tomorrow, brother." Seeing that Ningxi Ocean was about to arrive at the elevator, Ge Shuai said anxiously, "Are you going to eat the leftovers of Ningxi Ocean?" Swish. Ge Peng's eyes flickered slightly. He looked at the back of Ningxi Ocean, hesitated for a second, and said with clenched teeth, "Follow them. We can just pay a price. Just let Uncle Zh of Ningxi Ocean help us." "That's right." Ge Shuai grinned and took the lead in running quickly. At this time, Ningxi Ocean and Uncle Zh had entered the elevator. They were very concerned about that side. When they saw Ge brothers running over, Ningxi Ocean was a little relieved, but then he changed into a worried expression. Zoom. The door of the elevator was being closed slowly. Before the door closed, swish. In spite of the danger, a hand reached in and let the elevator door open again. "Why, Brother Peng and Brother Shuai, why are you here?" Ningxi Ocean had a strange expression, but then he became nervous. The Ge brothers were a little embarrassed. Ge Shuai's mind was full of that pretty woman just on the stage. He couldn't stand the excitement and said after hesitation, "Younger brother Ning, to be honest, Xian is the beauty our brothers have been paying attention to for a long time, but we are busy recently and haven't got the news of her. Today we know that she has come to Linhai." "What?" Ningxi Ocean shouted out in surprise. "You want to rob her from me? How can you call it robbing?" Ge Shuai retorted with some dissatisfaction, "Gentlemen are all very fond of fair ladies. We brothers have really paid attention to her for a long time." Ningxi Ocean's expression was very complex, as if it was hard for him to make a choice, and even sweat flew from both sides of his forehead. He was really nervous. "Or shall we compete fairly?" Ningxi Ocean gnawed his teeth and said, "I don't want to miss Xian, such a top beauty." "Huh?" Ge Peng suddenly glared at Ningxi Ocean and his voice was cold. "Ningxi Ocean, dare you to rob a woman from me?" Ge Peng was arrogant, because Ge brothers' position was too much higher than Ningxi Ocean's. Ahem. Uncle Zh was Ningxi Ocean's backer. He coughed softly, picked his eyebrows slightly and released some of his chi as a martial arts master. At the same time, he said, "What young Master Shuai said was true. Gentlemen are all fond of fair ladies. It's not a fight." Hiss. Ge Shuai's face changed slightly. He was worried and forgot that there was a Ningxi Ocean's supporter standing next to him. The situation was not optimistic. Ningxi Ocean came here with a helper when he went out, but Shuai and Ge Peng came to the club from afar, and they didn't bring anyone with them. Ge Shuai looked anxiously at Ge Peng. After 2 seconds of silence, Gu Peng looked up at Ning Xiaoshan. Xiaoshan, I have a request. Brother Peng, tell me. Ning Xiaoshan asked nervously. I want your uncle to help us stop Xian. Of course, we're asking you for help, and we'll definitely repay you. I have a horse farm in the eastern district, worth 300 million yuan. Do you have any interest in it, Xiaoshan? Gu Peng looked at Ning Xiaoshan without blinking his eyes. Although its market value was 300 million yuan, in fact, the value of that horse farm was only about 100 million yuan, and it was also a place that Gu Peng was tired of. Gu Peng thought it was better to ask for Uncle Xu's help at this cost. He felt that Xian was worth the price. Horse farm. Ning Xiaoshan suddenly fell into hesitation. Xiaoshan, you are clear about the specifications of that horse farm. My brother has given it up, and you can't let him down, can you? Gu Shuai stared at Ning Xiaoshan and asked slowly. Alas. Ning Xiaoshan hesitated for 5 seconds. Under the Gu brother's hot gaze, he sighed heavily and nodded. Since Brother Peng is so kind, how can I refuse you, Uncle J? Help them to stop Xian regardless of the bodyguards she has or where she is. You must bring her to them. All right. Uncle J nodded his head slightly. The Gu brothers were so excited now. They even felt that the elevator was so slow at this time. After arriving on the first floor, they hurried out. They're on the side. Let's drive over and stop them. Gu Shuai took out his car key and pressed it. The lights of a Pagani car in the side parking lot lit up. Xiu also took out the car key, and the lights of an Audi A8L not far from Pagani lit up. Brother Peng, follow Uncle J. Ning Xiaoshan pointed to Uncle J. Good, you can drive my car. Gu Shuai threw Pagani's key at Ning Xiaoshan as if he was dropping litter. Ning Xiaoshan didn't catch it, and the car key fell to the ground, but Gu Shuai didn't even look at it. He and Gu Peng followed Uncle J to his Audi. Ha ha ha. When Ning Xiaoshan bent down, he couldn't help sneering and marveling at his acting skills. After he picked up the key, his expression returned to normal. Looking at the Gu brothers getting in their car, Ning Xiaoshan curled his mouth, and then got on the Pagani. Ning Xiaoshan took a white pill from his pocket and swallowed it. At that time, on the Audi, Uncle J was driving. He had a green ring on his finger, which was floating with a thin mist that was hard to see by the naked eye, which soon turned into 2 strands and floated towards Gu Peng and Gu Shuai in the back seat, making them more excited. Uncle J, hurry up. Gu Shuai urged. Okay. Uncle J replied, then slammed on the accelerator. The car buzzed and jumped forward quickly. When they got to the side, sizzle, sizzle. 2 loud brake sounds came from Audi and Zhao Feng's Mercedes. Xian's 5-car team stopped. Zhao Feng frowned at the car in front of him and felt that they were purposeful. Young Master Gu, I'm only responsible for bringing Xian to this car, said Uncle J before getting off the car. I disagree. You must send us back to our house, otherwise, how can my brother's horse farm be handed over to Xiaoshan? Gu Shuai shook his head. Uncle J frowned at his words and thought about it. I'll drive your car and follow you. When I get to your address, I'll leave. Uncle J replied. Well, hurry up. Gu Peng said. After Uncle J got off, he got off and went to the driver's seat. After seeing the people coming down from the front car, in addition to the car in the middle of Xian's team, several people came down from the front and back, including Zhao Feng, Elder Meng, Liang Hao, and Leng Yi. Who are you? Zhao Feng asked in a deep voice. Uncle J ignored him and waved his right hand slightly. Bang, 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 bang. 4 muffled sounds sounded from Zhao Feng and his friends' chests. They flew more than 10 meters and fell to the ground. Their faces were white and their mouths were bleeding. Zhao Feng stared at Uncle J in astonishment. The stranger must be at Grandmaster middle stage or above. Seeing the middle-aged man walking straight to the car in the middle, Zhao Feng bit his teeth, stood up to meet him, and said at the same time, you'd better think it over, you. Stop talking nonsense. Uncle J waved his hand again, and suddenly hot energy turned into a huge hammer, which kicked Zhao Feng flying again. Zhao Feng fell onto the ground. But Leng suddenly attacked Uncle Zh from the right 5 meters away. Uncle Zh turned around and looked at her indifferently, naive. He clapped his right hand sideways. Bang! The body of Leng was like a kite with a broken line. She flew backward for more than 10 meters and fell to the ground after hitting the wall. Uncle Zh looked straight ahead again and saw Liang Hao and Elder Meng were 2 meters away from him. Uncle Zh frowned and kicked his feet out in an instant, which made them fall to the ground and unable to get up. Looking at them, Uncle Zh raised his arm slightly. At this moment, he wanted to kill them. Stop. At this time, a cold voice came. It was Xian who opened the door and came down. What do you want to do? I'm instructed by young Master Gu to ask Miss Zi to come over and have a talk, said Uncle Zh calmly. After hearing the words, Xian looked at Zhao Feng, whose face was dark, and shook her head slightly. Then she looked at Uncle Zh again and said, "Okay. This way please." Uncle Zh took the lead to Audi's co-pilot, opened the door. After Xian got in the car, he walked quickly to the back. After seeing this, Ningxi Ocean let Uncle Zh drive Gushwai's Pagani, and he went to his own Ferrari on the backside, following them far behind. Zhao Feng and the other 3 looked at each other and stood up in pain. At this time, Zif quickly opened the window. Let's follow them. I've informed my brother-in-law. Yes. Zhao Feng and several others quickly got on the car and kept up with the Audi A8L at the front. At the same time, Zhao Feng was not at ease. He called Zhang Han and told him the enemy was likely to be a martial artist at Grandmaster middle stage or above. After the call, they began following the Audi A8L. Not far behind them, Uncle Zh was following the Pagani slowly. Behind Pagani, Ningxi Ocean was smoking while driving his Ferrari. Damn it, the Gu brothers, if they do something in the car, they will really die under the peony, which is so romantic. But, could they do something with Xian? No, they couldn't. At this time, sitting in the passenger seat, Xian was not panicky at all, because she already felt it. The special hair in the back of her head was getting warm, and that complex mark on her wrist was faintly shining. If Uncle Zh saw it, he might turn pale with fear. If he was near Xian, he could feel the mark on Xian's wrist. There was startling energy in that mark that could tear the space apart. Chapter 573, so fierce and powerful. Zhang Han suppressed the talent from the world lit and got the 4th stage spirit treasure. Only through his exquisite refining, he made 2 fixed-point transmission gates. The transmission gate and the guarding magic weapon based on hair were Zhang Huan's guard for Xian and Meng Meng. When Zif was calling Zhang Han, in Peninsula Hotel, Zhang Han was sitting on the sofa, holding Meng Meng's little palm in his left hand, while the others were still talking. When Zhang Han picked up the phone and heard the content, his eyes froze. "I'll be right there," Zhang Han said and hung up. At this time, the others around turned their gaze at Zhang Han. Zhang Han asked Meng Meng in his arms, "Do you want some ice cream?" "Huh? I want it. Dad will pick up Mum and come back to buy you ice cream. Can I go with you?" "Meng Meng should wait here, and Dad will be back soon." "Okay, I'll stay here." After exchanging a few simple words, Zhang Han got up and went out of the door. At the moment he left the room, his face changed. Instead of going to the elevator, he came to the stairway. As he went down, Zhang Han's figure gradually faded and disappeared. A light wind seemed to blow through the window. Wang Ming just came out of the room. After he looked around for a while, his mouth slightly quivered. Where is he? Why did he leave so fast? About 10 seconds later. Zoom. A Mercedes was started in the parking lot. Zhang Han appeared in the driver's seat and drove the car out very quickly. At the same time, on the street not far from Ruxin Hotel, an Audi A8L was running forward, followed by a Mercedes-Benz at the back. In the car headed by Zhao Feng, his face was a little white, and he called Ahu. "Ahu, are you with Ms. Liu? Check the information about a car, whose license number is XXXXXX, and a man named Young Master Gu. They're two who look alike." Zhao Feng didn't know who the enemy was, but his mate would soon be here, therefore he would arrange the logistics work and check the information of their enemy. He knew that anyone who dared to bully his mom would die. Not far from the back of the Mercedes-Benz team, Uncle Zh was following them in his Pagani with a leisurely expression on his face, as if he had nothing to do with this. 10 meters away from Pagani, Xuanhuan dialed a phone number while driving his Ferrari. "Hello, third uncle, the fish has been hooked. Now I'm driving to the villa of Gupeng's Garden of Water Charm. I'm sure that the guy named Zhang will come." Okay, I'll take care of them here. If anything happens, I'll report the situation to third uncle as soon as possible." Woo. Hanging up, Xuanhuan took a long breath. "Ningzanki was seriously injured because of me. What I have done now is to make up for my mistakes. If things go well, I'll get great benefits. I'll be able to keep on messing." Xuanhuan was concerned about this. Among the leading Audi cars, Xuanhuan focused on the ones behind. "Damn it, they're as disgusting as a gummy candy. I'll kill them." Xuanhuan in the back seat scolded, took out his mobile phone and dialed someone's number. "Hello, Uncle Liu, are you in the Garden of Water Charm? I'm driving there on Sanzui Road. A group of people is following us, and you can take someone to clean them up. My brother and I are driving an Audi A8. After hanging up, Xuanhuan looked at Xian with a smile. "Your bodyguards are very loyal. They're not just bodyguards." Xian was a little nervous, but she tried to keep her tone and expression calm. "Then what else?" Xuanhuan asked casually. "Friends and family members." Ha ha ha. Hearing this, Xuanhuan laughed. "Xian, I didn't expect that you are not only beautiful, but also lovely. I thought that the beauty of Miss I saw on the screen was the effect of makeup and photography. Today, I found that you are more beautiful than you on the pictures and TV. It's amazing." Gupeng turned his head and looked at Xian. "I'm flattered." Xian said calmly, "It's not just the appearance, your heart is also very strong, and you don't panic at all in the face of such a situation." Gupeng smiled meaningfully. "Don't you wonder what we are going to do with you?" Xian shook her head slightly, with no words. "I'm afraid you've been through this before, haven't you? Are you used to it?" Xuanhuan evilly chuckled. Xian frowned slightly and looked at him in the rear-view mirror, but Xian was still silent. She knew that she needed time now. It was better not to let them have too much mood change. Xian didn't speak, and the brothers were more and more excited. "See the tall buildings in front? Behind them is the villain area, where I have a villa." Gupeng smiled and said, "We are very interested in you. Whether you agree or not, we will do something primitive with you today. If you cooperate with us, you'll get money, fame, and fortune easily. Even in the future, we will make you a super frontline international star. Now you can make a choice. But before that, let's watch a play here." Xuanhuan saw several cars coming quickly from the front, clapped his hands and said, "Brother, they are here. Well, we'll see the play first." Gupeng smiled softly and stopped the car. The Mercedes-Benz, Pagani, and Ferrari following them also stopped. "Wow, the bodyguards of the Ge brothers are here. Do they want to trample Xian's bodyguards first? Damn it, where's the man who is said to be powerful? Are the Ge brothers going to realize their hope without difficulties?" Xuanhuan thought for a moment, got out of the car and walked to a tree beside the road. He lit a cigarette, smoking while watching several cars getting closer and closer. On the left and right were the school grounds. Now it was winter vacation and there was no student. In front of him were the crossroads and some cars were passing by. Why are the two cars behind? Xuanhuan saw two Audi cars blocked at the traffic light intersection more than 100 meters away from the front, and four men in black suits came running to this side. Obviously they were also the bodyguards of the Ge brothers. However, before they ran past the intersection, screech, the sound of a sharp tire rubbing against the ground came out. In the sight of those in the dozens of cars at the intersection, and under the gaze of Xuanhuan, Zhao Feng, Xian, Ge brothers, and many others on the other side, A black Mercedes-Benz, like a ghost, came with a long drift from the side of the road, then was driven forward quickly. When it reached the front of Audi, it was stopped with a tail flick. Whose freaking man is it? Xuanhuan shook his head and asked in confusion. He is here. Uncle J's eyes lit up in the Pagani, but he soon became a little nervous. Am I a little too close? He lowered himself involuntarily, as if he wanted to hide himself in the car. Under everyone's gaze. Bang! The door of the Mercedes-Benz opened, and a leg in skate shoes and jeans appeared. Then the whole body left the driver's seat. It was a somewhat handsome and resolute man. He looked serious and went straight to the Audi A8L. At this time, in the 6 cars arriving from both sides, Gepeng's bodyguards, including 2 Heaven Stage Masters, found that they could not move at this moment. They could only watch the man walking step by step towards the Audi. Soon, he went to the co-pilot's position and gently opened the door. Let's go. Xian raised her head a little, gave him a smile, nodded got up and got out of the car, took his arm and walked back to the Mercedes. During this period, both Gepeng and Xuanhuan found that they could only move their eyes, and could not even speak. What is going on? Under the gaze of everyone, Zhang Han and Xian got on the Mercedes-Benz and slowly drove forward. The other Mercedes-Benz at the back followed them. He just left like this. Uncle J's expression in the Pagani in the back was a little complicated. Isn't he called Merciless Zhang? In the face of such provocation, why didn't he? Before Uncle J could finish thinking, clatter. All of a sudden, a wisp of wind drifted over the cars in the front, and he felt several huge energy palms converging rapidly. The energy in the palms surprised him. He finally takes actions. Just when the idea came up, bang! The first car on the right side of Gepeng's bodyguards was suddenly broken like a board. They were ordinary people who couldn't find the energy palm, so they only saw the sudden scene. They were all stunned. Bang! The second sound came out, and the second car on the right was crushed into a pancake by unknown energy. Bang! Bang! 2 more sounds. The 2 cars on the left were crushed. The whole car now looked less thick than a mattress, and the people inside, he dared not to think about it. At this time, in the vehicles on the opposite side of the street, everyone was stunned and couldn't believe what happened. What is it? Psychic events? After 4 cars were crushed, Gepeng and Xuanhuan found that they could move. Ah! They yelled and pushed the door, only to find that they couldn't open it. Help! In the shouting of the 2 people, suddenly, there was another sound. Crack! They widely opened their eyes and looked up, finding that the shape of the car's roof was changing, like being pressed down by a mountain. Bang! This was the last scene they saw. Hiss! No wonder he is called Merciless Zhang. Uncle Jin Pagani gasped in fear and exclaimed, he dared to do this in the urban area, obviously he's a merciless man. His palm moved to open the door, but he found the door. He couldn't open it. Uncle Jim immediately fell into a panic. He felt the crisis coming from the top. However, just when he started to activate the spiritual force in his body, bang! A huge voice came out, and the whole Pagani was crushed. Ah! Ningxi Ocean beside the roadside tree looked at all this in a daze and even just now heard Uncle J's scream. The cigarette in his right hand fell to the ground, but he didn't realize it. He was stunned and didn't know what to do now. Chapter 574, Stop him. What's this? What's going on? Ningxi Ocean's face suddenly turned to wax yellow after he was at a loss. He staggered back 4 steps and his eyes were round as if he had seen a ghost. Clatter. He couldn't stop the cold sweat flowing down his forehead. He stumbled down on the ground, and his mind was full of the calm-looking man. He is Zhang Han. He did this? Yes, it must be him. But how could he be so powerful? Ningxi Ocean was scared. He took the phone out of his pocket with his right hand, but it fell to the ground because of the shaking of his hand. Hiss. Taking a deep breath, Ningxi Ocean picked up his mobile phone and dialed a phone tremblingly. Third uncle, I might have seen Zhang Han Yang. Something happened. Something terrible happened. Uncle Zh was crushed to death. The Ge brothers were crushed to death. So were their bodyguards. All of them. In front of the spot. Those bodyguards in black suits who came late because of the traffic jam were looking not far ahead with widely opened eyes and mouths. They were stunned. It's terrible. Hurry up. Contact the Ge family. Hiss. 4 bodyguards hurriedly took out their mobile phones and informed the Ge family at the first time. The Ge family was shocked by the news. Ge Peng and Ge Shui were the sons of Patriarch Ge. After confirming the authenticity of the news, many Ge family members began to take action. The Ge family was deeply rooted in Linhai City and had a huge influence here. They deserved the title of the local emperor. In addition to the Ge family, the Ning family was also a little depressed. There were few grandmasters strong in the family, and Uncle Jet middle stage was killed. If the Ge family gave up pursuing this matter, the Ning family would really lose a lot. Fortunately, they soon learned more exciting news. The director of the Lehigh National Security Agency, Ge Shizhen, set off. Yes, this is the Ge family. They are the top family in Linhai. And how will they give in? This is bound to be a hard fight. Many people in the Ning family had this idea, but they were still depressed. Why did Uncle Zh follow them? We didn't know that Zhang Han Yang could be so merciless and killed him with no reason. At the scene of the incident, the traffic lights at the intersection changed several times, but no car was started. A lot of private car owners were also stunned. They didn't know what had happened and were confused. On the bus several meters behind, there were more than 10 people who looked at each other for a while and began to discuss it. The people in front are making movies, aren't they? Or magic? What is the situation? 6 or 7 cars have become pieces of paper. It's too exaggerated. Should they be props? But even if they are props, where are the people just in the cars? As soon as this speech came out, the bus fell into a dead silence. Yes. Where are those people in the car? Are they performing strange ways of dying? It wasn't a show, but those people deserved to die. Gradually, many people realized that something bad had happened. A number of private cars drove by curiously. The car owners' faces changed when they saw the situation in the front. It was terrible that those cars were like being crushed by a roller and became pancakes. 3 minutes later, zoom, zoom. Dozens of police cars were coming from every intersection. Seeing so many police officers, more people turned pale. This was really a terrible accident. Is it caused by the Mercedes-Benz team that left before? Did the young man who got off the car alone do it? How did he do it? A lot of people were guessing. They also knew that this matter should have something to do with the young man who got off the car just now. However, the concerned party, Zhang Han, was driving and chatting with Xian in a low voice. Just when she left, Xian also heard a few dull sounds from the back. Xian knew it was Zhang Han making his moves. She pursed her red lips and didn't say anything or look back at them. Zhang Han, worried that Xian would be afraid, reached out his right hand and touched her head gently. He said softly, "Don't be afraid, I won't put you in danger." Xian pursed her mouth, like a kitten, and rubbed her pink cheek against Zhang Han's arm. Then she raised her right hand, and pointed to her hair with her left hand. "I know, because of them, I can feel them and I'm not afraid, I just felt a little nervous." With a smile, Zhang Han changed the topic. "My eldest uncle, aunt and my second uncle from the wrong family are here, waiting for us to have dinner with them in the hotel. They're here today." "They are in the hotel now? Well, I haven't dressed myself up yet," Xian said, smoothing her hair. "It's okay, you are very beautiful now, you are dressed perfectly." Zhang Han praised. "Is that right? But I think I should curl up my hair and dress more modestly." Xian looked at her dress and said, "Is this suit suitable?" "Of course it suits you well." Zhang Han gave her a smile. They went on chatting. After driving back for more than 10 minutes, they found that there were almost no pedestrians at the intersection in front of them, just 3 Hummers on the left and right sides. 8 men were standing outside the Hummer, each dressed in blue, and their right shoulder was marked by the National Security Agency. At this time, Zhang Han suddenly said, "Do you know why, now, there are still people who want to trouble you? Well, because I look good?" Xian blinked her beautiful big eyes. She knew that men liked to conquer beautiful women, and she happened to be such a beautiful woman. This is one reason. Zhang Han smiled indifferently and continued. The second reason is that they were afraid of me before being killed by me. No one will dare to do this again when I shock the whole world by killing my enemies. All of a sudden, 2 middle-aged people came here with cold faces. 10 meters ahead of Zhang Han's car, one of them held out his hand and spoke in a stiff voice, "Stop." However, Zhang Han did not pay attention to them, still driving the car. Then the man on the right took a step forward. "Stop." He was unable to finish speaking. The 2 middle-aged people, together with several men behind them, were shocked, and then they flew backward to both sides, covering more than 20 meters, falling to the ground and not making any sounds anymore. A line of Mercedes continued to the south side of the road. 3 minutes after they left, 2 pale figures came out of the cars on both sides, shivering. One of them took out the phone. "Director Gu, he made a move again and he ignored us. Protector Fang and the others were all killed." After he heard this news, Gu Shizhen's face darkened. He was on a military Hummer and driving into a road blocked by traffic police. There was a crossroad 300 meters away from the front of the road, which was the only way for Zhang Han to return to the Peninsula Hotel. At this time, in the middle of the intersection, stood 6 extraordinary men. 5 of them were at Grandmaster late stage, and 1 of them was at Grandmaster middle stage. Not far from the 2 sides of the intersection, there were more than 30 personnel of the National Security Agency. Except for the elder at Grandmaster middle stage, the other protectors, chief supervisors, and others all stood on both sides. Though they were here, they could only be onlookers. When Gu Shizhen arrived, the 6 Grandmasters all greeted him. "Director Gu." "Ah." Gu Shizhen nodded with a dark face. "My condolences, but I didn't expect that Zhang Han Yang would be so unruly. He was so arrogant that he even hurt the non-martial people in the urban area. He must be punished," said one of the white-haired aged men, snorting. "The murderer will be killed in the end. Zhang Han Yang is a murderous man, and he is guilty of a lot of crimes. He must be punished," another one said seriously. But after saying this, he looked at Gu Shizhen and added, "When will Elder Donglai arrive? My uncle is learning the peerless saber technique recently, at a very critical moment, so I didn't report the news to him." Gu Shizhen shook his head and said, "Besides, Zhang Han Yang is not worth my uncle's punishment." Hiss. As soon as this remark came out, the faces of several people on the scene changed slightly. "If Gu Donglai doesn't come, how can we defeat Zhang Han Yang?" Seeing their faces, Gu Shizhen raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "If we face Zhang Han Yang alone, we can't defeat him, but don't forget that his woman and followers are with him, and he doesn't dare to fight against us now. As long as we take them to the headquarters and use that weapon, their fate will be in our hands." Gu Shizhen's words changed the facial expression of the other 6 people. The martial artist at Grandmaster middle stage asked in astonishment, "It's the thing fixed in the headquarters in the legend?" "Yes." Gu Shizhen nodded. "Then that's good." The old man with white hair said with a grim smile, "The 7 of us can still defeat Zhang Han Yang." "That's right. That propaganda of Zhang Han Yang is too exaggerated. He hasn't arrived at the divine realm yet, and he doesn't have enough strength to be so arrogant. Invincible Grandmaster? Ha ha, he hasn't fought with Elder Donglai yet. How can he be an invincible Grandmaster?" Several people present expressed their views. The other 6 people had the idea of depending on the Gu family, although some of them were still very nervous. But in such a moment, it was a good time to find a supporter. What was more important was that they believed that they could defeat Zhang Han through combining their strength. Most of the members of National Security Agency on both sides were nervous. Merciless Zhang is coming. Here we have the director of National Security Agency, 3 elders, and 3 other top 15 masters on the martial artist list. Even Merciless Zhang will be afraid when he sees us. If we do fight, it will be a world-shaking war. I'm afraid that the buildings on both sides will be destroyed. He's coming, hiss, Zhang Han is coming. Suddenly, there were several screams in the crowd, and many people began looking ahead. A Mercedes-Benz was coming towards them. It was just an ordinary car, but it seemed to have turned into an ancient fierce beast at this time, which made many people's hearts beat faster. They were so nervous that they even held their breath and did not blink, staring straight at the approaching cars. Chapter 575, Fighting a Way Out. He is coming. Zhang Han is coming. With many low and tense voices, a line of Mercedes-Benz slowly approached the people who were waiting for them. There was no one on either side of the street because the streets around were under emergency control. On one side of the street was a square, and on the other side was a private manor. This section of road was the urgent choice of Gushizhen's men. When Gushizhen saw the leading car, his eyes slightly lit up. He had 6 martial artists at Grandmaster late stage and 1 at middle stage. He can't defeat us within 10 moves, and even my uncle can't do it. As for Zhang Han, the people behind him are his weakness. Gushizhen knew the strength of Gudonglai, the elder of his family. After all, the 7 of them were not weak and even Gudonglai couldn't defeat them within 10 moves. Therefore, he was sure that Zhang Han couldn't do it either. We'll catch him. Gushizhen looked at the front seriously. He was more confident now. Under everyone's gaze, a line of 6 Mercedes-Benzes slowly approached them. With the approach of cars, many members of the National Security Agency became more and more nervous. The first Mercedes-Benz was 50 meters from the intersection. The driver's door suddenly opened, and a man in a black leisure suit came down from the car. It was Zhang Han. He was walking forward in front of the car, but the car was still moving slowly in a straight line. Though it seemed that Zhang Han was slow, his speed was actually the same as the car, which was so strange. He is approaching us. His calm expression made him look like an immortal. It was as if, under his plain face, there was a kind of dignity beyond the world. Why is he so calm? Why is he so indifferent? What kind of person is Zhang Han? Dozens of people present were confused. But just at this moment, under their gaze, Director Gushizhen made a move. He flashed towards Zhang Han. Read more chapters at readnovelfull.com. The 6 people behind him also moved forward, but they were a little bit further apart from each other, so as to ensure that when Zhang Han made a move, they could seize the opportunity to attack the other people behind Zhang Han at the first time. At this speed, they would collide in less than 10 seconds. Are they going to have a fight? Bang! A dull noise came out. Zhang Han closed the door of his car. Is he ready to make a move? Under a lot of nervous gazes, Gushizhen, the director, opened his mouth first. Zhang Han, as a director of the National Security Agency, how dare you hurt ordinary people here in Linhai? I'm Gushizhen, the director of Linhai National Security Agency. I order you to go with me. You are from the Gu family? Zhang Han looked at him and asked calmly. Yes. Gushizhen slightly raised his eyebrows. Zhang Han, you hurt my family members and look down on the Gu family. You are as arrogant as in the rumor. But don't forget you are in Linhai, and you can't do anything at your will. You are a director of National Security Agency, just like me, and I advise you to compromise and go with me, otherwise, you'll be killed when Elder Gu finishes his closed-door cultivation. Hiss. As soon as this statement was made, many National Security Agency personnel around them changed their facial expressions. Director Gu is really fearless and powerful. He's not afraid of Zhang Han at all. It's amazing. No wonder he is Gushizn, no wonder he is from the Gu family. Just when they were talking like this, suddenly, a light voice rang out. I intended to spare your life, what a pity. Swish, swish, swish. The gazes of all the onlookers moved away from Gushizn and again gathered on Zhang Han. Just at this moment, boom, all of a sudden, there was a blast. Then, under everyone's gaze, Zhang Han's figure suddenly flickered. A hazy black light flashed past and went straight to Gushizn. Zhang Han didn't even give Gushizn time to react. He suddenly appeared in front of Gushizn. Clatter. Gushizn was shocked and tried to activate his spiritual force, but he was much slower than Zhang Han. Before Gushizn could make a move, Zhang Han raised his right hand and pressed his index finger to the forehead of Gushizn. No. Gushizn was astonished and about to say something, but he just opened his mouth and didn't even have time to say a complete word. Zhang Han's finger fell. It accurately pressed on Gushizn's forehead. Bang! Two green flashes of lightning suddenly occupied the pupils of Gushizn. Just at this moment, the 6 people on both sides of Gushizn were horrified, and even the old man with white hair cried out, how could it be possible? In such a short distance, how can he break through the sound barrier only by his body? Another man exclaimed, but only the martial artist at Grandmaster Middle Stage said the most useful sentence. Run! He shouted at the top of his voice. At the moment when his words were uttered, the frightening voice spread again. Bang, bang, bang. In the astonished eyes of dozens of people standing on both sides of the street ahead, Zhang Hanyang's figure was suddenly divided into 6 in the dull sound. Those 6 people just wanted to escape, and even their bodies retreated half a meter, but they could not resist Zhang Hanyang's strange speed. At last, under Zhang Han's finger, their bodies were fixed, as if their time would not pass any more. Whoosh! The 6 figures of Zhang Han on the field began to flicker and become blurred. At the same time, by the side of the first Benz driving forward, Zhang Han appeared. When pressing his right hand to the car's door, he suddenly looked up at both sides of the front road. Hiss! Dozens of people standing there were suddenly frightened, and most of them took several steps back. A few of them were so scared that they could neither speak nor act. There were several people with poor psychological quality who fell directly on the ground. Their minds were full of Zhang Han's calm face and indifferent eyes. Though Zhang Han was a handsome man, he was like a devil in their minds. At this moment, their bodies became stiff, as if their necks were pinched, and their hearts stopped suddenly. Bang! In these frightened eyes, Zhang Han took back his gaze, lowered his head, opened the door and got into the driver's seat. Zoom! The car sped up a little and headed for the front. Woo! When the car left their sight, these people suddenly found that their backs had been wet with sweat. But at this time, no one paid attention to how much sweat they sweated. Swish, swish, swish. Their gazes converged on the 7 people standing still tens of meters away from them. What's wrong with Director Gu? Were they fixed by Zhang Hanyang? It should be, or how could they not move? Are they dead? All of a sudden, the voice rang out in the crowd, and then there were many sounds of gasping in astonishment. Go and have a look, one of the protectors hurriedly said. He didn't dare to go alone. In groups, they slowly approached Gushizn. Director Gu, the protector cried carefully, hearing no response. He gradually despaired. Gulp. After swallowing his saliva, he held his breath, walked to the front, and touched the shoulder of Gushizn gently. Director, burp. For a moment, he stepped back in fright, only to see that the place he touched on Gushizn's body had become something like ash and began to drift away. Clatter. He seemed to have pushed the dominoes, and within several seconds' times, the whole body of Gushizn turned into flying ash. With a light wind, he brushed across the field, and the other 6 bodies also slowly dissipated. He is dead? Director Gu is dead? My goodness, they are all dead. What can we do? The crowd was in an uproar, and the protector, with a pale face, looked at the direction of the Mercedes-Benz leaving and murmured to himself, I finally know why. He is called Merciless Zhang. I'm afraid there's going to be a big shock in Linhai. It's not just them, even Zhao Feng and others, who were driving behind, were shocked. Well, Master seems to be much stronger. Zhao Feng's mouth slightly quivered. He thought that under the cultivation of their master, he and the other friends would make rapid progress and shorten the distance between them and their master. But in fact, they were getting further and further away. He couldn't see what level of strength Master was at now. Has he reached the divine realm? No. Is he now at the innateness stage? No. It's too early to talk about it. Is it the treasure from the last relics? So he is at foundation late stage? How can a foundation late stage martial artist be so powerful? He was not like a green hand but a master. Zhao Feng smiled bitterly and thought of the great Zhang Han had talked about. He still felt as if he were dreaming. Leng Yu and Elder Meng at the back were driving and recalling what had happened, and even Liang Hao was confused. He was getting more and more merciless. While they were still confused, the team returned to the Peninsula Hotel. Zhang Han and Xian took the lead in getting off the car. When Zhao Feng and Liang Hao come from behind him, Zhang Han's right hand moved slightly and several pills were thrown at them. Master. Zhao Feng was about to say something. Zhang Han waved his hand. Go upstairs and have a rest. Okay. Zhao Feng stopped and nodded. He wanted to say it was their fault, but it seemed that Master didn't think so. In fact, they were not to blame. Zhang Han knew that they were still growing up. Then Zhang Han took Xian's hand and led them into the hotel. After going upstairs, Zhang Han stopped at the door and an ice cream appeared in his hand, which he promised Meng Meng. They went back to their room. Meng Meng couldn't wait to stand up from the sofa. Papa, Mama, brother, sister-in-law, Fei Fei, you are back. Zhang Li said. Rong Jiaxin and Wang Ming also said hello, and then Zhang Han and Xian went to the sofa, sat down and gave Meng Meng her ice cream. Zif began drinking water to calm herself down. After introducing each other, Jia Wei took Xian's hand and was very satisfied with her. Rong Sheng exclaimed that the three members of the family were all good-looking. Even Rong Yong nodded in agreement. After sitting for 10 minutes, it was almost 5 o'clock. Rong Yong looked at his watch and said, why don't we go down first? I've reserved a place at Jinan restaurant. Let's go to eat and talk. I have some business to deal with around 7 p.m. It could be seen that as a section chief, Rong Yong was still very busy. Well, I'm just a little hungry. Xian smiled politely, taking the lead in getting up and going to change clothes with Meng Meng. A few minutes later, when they returned, Xian had changed into a more dignified dress, while Meng Meng was wearing a casual suit. Apart from Zif returning to her room to rest, all the others came to the elevator and went downstairs. Ding! When the elevator reached the first floor, the door opened, and all the people inside came out, but they didn't walk out for 5 steps. Rong Yong was stunned when he saw the scene in front. In front of them stood 15 or 16 police officers, and a middle-aged man with a dignified but nervous face stood in front of those officers. When Rong Yong saw them, he quickly reached out his hands and strode towards them. At the same time, he said in a very warm voice, "Wow, Director Nan is here too." Chapter 576. What, General? Director Nan? Xian subconsciously grabbed Zhang Han's hand. The director brought someone here. Although they weren't armed, Xian could see from Director Nan and some of his nervous men at the back that they were coming with evil intent. Director Nan looked at Zhang Han, then at Xian and Meng Meng. He was hesitating. Finally, he waved his right hand gently to a dozen people at the back. The hands that those people pressed on their waists slowly released. At the same time, they sighed with relief, and even some of them began wiping their cold sweat. They knew how fierce the handsome man in front of them was, though he was holding the little hand of a beautiful girl and seemed harmless to human beings and animals. Even the director of the local National Security Agency was killed by him, and the National Security Agency was left without a leader. They were the only ones to deal with it. How much courage did it take for them to risk their lives? In fact, all these police officers, including Director Nan, were silently complaining about the order of their chief. They had no choice but to come here because of that commander's order. In this case, Director Nan decided not to take out their weapons because he knew it would be useless to do so. He discovered that fact the moment he saw Zhang Han walking out of the elevator. After that, he'd been thinking about how to say it. At this time, Rong Yong greeted him, who was very enthusiastic. "Who is he?" Director Nan took back his gaze and looked at Rong Yong. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes. "Who are you?" "Well." Rong Yong felt a little embarrassed, but he maintained calm and gave Director Nan a polite smile. He nodded. "I'm Rong, working in Yilin office in the Southern District." "I see." Director Nan's face became a little indifferent. In the Yilin office in South District, the chief executive was Director Ma. Although they were both called directors, they were in charge of different affairs. There was a kind of thing called real power, and the real power gap between them was beyond imagination. The middle-aged man in front of him was an office man, whose highest position was just a section chief. At this time, he could not arouse any interest of Director Nan. Director Nan even didn't want to talk anymore, because he had more important tasks. So he again looked at Zhang Han and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Zhang, I think you know my background. Please cooperate with our work and come with us." Rong Yong was stunned. "My gosh, Director Nan is here for Han?" He is the director of the General Public Security Bureau of Linhai City, who is in charge of the power of life and death. Besides, he is one of the co-members of Linhai officials. And it was not even easy to see him when Rong Yong was not demoted. How powerful he is. Is he here just for Han? Why? Rong Yong was shocked and immediately made a guess. His heart beat violently. At this time, there were only two possibilities. One is that Han has a high status, the other is that he has committed a major crime. He slowly turned to look at Zhang Han, but found that his expression was a little bit impatient. Even Rongsheng and his wife Jia Wei were confused. What's going on? As natives in Linhai, they were fully aware of the power of Director Nan, so they felt a little nervous. Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin looked at each other and shook their heads with wry smiles. "I'm afraid something happened just when Han went to pick up Yan." Wang Ming knew that Zhang Han was a man of his own will, and his attitude towards his family and friends was quite different from that towards the others. When facing his enemy, he was called Merciless Zhang. Someone must have become his enemy, alas. Wang Ming sighed to himself, as he could imagine, the fate of those people should be miserable. At this time, the eyes of all the people gathered on Zhang Han. Even Meng Meng raised her head in a daze. Her little body was close to Zhang Han's right leg, and her little hand held Zhang Han's big hand tightly. "Director Nan." Zhang Han looked at him and nodded. "I don't have time now, please go back first, you can come back to me later." Zhang Han's answer was very calm, and even gave Director Nan an illusion. His strength is not as good as ours. Director Nan took a step forward and shook his head calmly. "No way, Mr. Zhang, you have to come with us now, this is the most important thing. I don't know if you are clear that in some cities there are some secrets. For example, someone who has superpowers, they are the guardians of Hua Nation. It happens that Linhai is such a city. Now, Mr. Zhang, I advise you to think about it calmly and take the initiative to go with me, otherwise, we'll take you by force, and they are not the same." Director Nan knew something. Why did martial arts rarely cause trouble in the city? When there was a fight, even the powerful masters would choose some places with rare human traces. This was because, in many cities, there were people who were called protectors or guardians. They were a group of mysterious people at the top of the headquarters of the National Security Agency. So Director Nan still had a bit of confidence. Xian was not worried about them, but Meng Meng was nervous. She looked left and right with bright and shining eyes, and finally, she said, feeling a little wronged, "Uncle Police, my papa is the best, not a bad guy, you can't take him away." While she was talking, Meng Meng's eyes became waterier. It could be seen that if the director kept saying more, she would cry. Seeing this, Zhang Han quickly squatted down and picked up Meng Meng. At the same time, he smiled and said, "They came here to ask me something, and it's my work, but I won't go with them. I'll accompany Meng Meng." While talking like this, Zhang Han touched Meng Meng's little head. Meng Meng was a little relieved, but because she was held by Zhang Han, she turned her back to those people and could not see their expressions. But just as Zhang Han said this, his face suddenly became serious. Zhang Han turned his gaze to Director Nan and said calmly, "I said that I don't have time now. Don't challenge my patience anymore. I'll give you 10 seconds to leave, otherwise, I don't mind sending you to see your Director Gu." "Sending me to see Director Gu? Are you joking? He is dead." Hiss. For a moment, Director Nan's face changed. A dozen officers behind him took a step back together. They were silently counting down 10 seconds. Rong Yong, Rong Sheng, and Jia Wai in the front also became a little confused. What's going on? Why is Han so impolite towards Director Nan? Why do they seem to be afraid of Han? Most people were afraid of death, including Director Nan. At this time, he was really nervous, because what he saw in Zhang Han's eyes was indifference, the indifference that he looked at human life like a mustard. What can I do? As he counted down, Director Nan felt anxious. After only 3 seconds, the cold sweat on his forehead flowed down his cheeks. Rong Yong was surprised. How could this happen? Generally, people will sweat when they see Director Nan. Now Director Nan himself is sweating. Is it because of the deficiency of his kidney? 3 seconds left. Director Nan suddenly felt the danger. When he was about to speak, from the side came a rough voice with dignity and discontent. "Director Nan, why are you here? Who sent you here?" Swish, swish, swish. Many people turned their gazes to that direction. After seeing the comer, Director Nan was surprised and then sighed with relief. He made an obeisance and said, "Hello, Secretary Liu." As if a Rong Yong near Director Nan, he was stunned with his mouth widely opened. Then he reacted and hurried to greet Secretary Liu with trembling voice. "Nice to meet you, Secretary Liu." My goodness, it's Secretary Liu. What is Secretary Liu doing here? He couldn't believe that Secretary Liu of Linhai City, who was the head of the local government, a deputy state-level official, superior and in charge of the supreme authority here, how could he come in person? Moreover, he only brought 2 subordinates here, not even guards. Rong Yong was astonished at that moment. Even Rong Sheng and Jia Wai were a little shocked. Officials like Secretary Liu were really out of reach for them. Under their uneasy gazes, Secretary Liu looked at Director Nan seriously as if he was about to blame Director Nan. When Secretary Liu was blaming others with his eyes, his dissatisfaction was obvious. At this moment, Director Nan felt very bitter in the heart. "Why didn't you ask me for instructions?" asked Secretary Liu in a flat voice. Director Nan felt a little out of breath. He lowered his head and replied, "It's the order of Commander Gu." Secretary Liu frowned. "You are a cadre of the state, not a cadre of a private enterprise." Director Nan's face was pale, and he hurriedly replied, "It's my fault." If he behaved like this, the dozen shivering police officers behind him would feel more nervous. They also felt very bitter in the heart. They were all confused when they were commanded to go here and there. "Humphrey." Secretary Liu snorted and then turned his gaze at Zhang Han. In an instant, he changed his face, smiled and reached out with his right hand. What he said stunned Rong Yong, Rong Sheng, and Jia Wai again. "Ha ha, General Zhang, welcome to Linhai. I've heard about General Zhang's deeds long ago. I'm so envious. Why wasn't General Zhang born in Linhai?" PFFT. Rong Yong could not help but spit on the half-face of Director Nan. His eyes were like dead fish eyes as he stared at Zhang Han directly. Secretary Liu's words were echoing in his mind. "General Zhang, General Zhang, General Zhang." Director Nan, who silently wiped Rong Yong's saliva on his face, felt very depressed. Why must he get involved in this matter? Nice to meet you, Secretary Liu. Zhang Han smiled and shook hands with Secretary Liu. Isn't that a good attitude? Why resort to violence? What a beautiful little girl, are you Meng Meng? Secretary Liu didn't choose to continue talking with Zhang Han. Instead, he used the safest way to get closer to Zhang Han. He knew that when he wanted to chat with Zhang Han, he might as well have a chat with Meng Meng first, because Meng Meng seemed a little aggrieved and nervous. Huh? Meng Meng was surprised. How do you know my name? Because your father is a very powerful man, a general. Secretary Liu said with a smile. Huh? My papa is the most powerful. My papa is a general. Meng Meng was very happy for a while, but then she saw Director Nan and others, and her lips pursed slightly. Uncle, I don't like them anymore. They want to take papa away, they are bad. Meng Meng also realized that those people were afraid of the smiling man in front of her, so she told him what they had done. Zhang Han, Xian, Wang Ming, and Rong Jiaxin were all amused by Meng Meng and they couldn't help shaking their heads and smiling. But Secretary Liu nodded in agreement. Then let them bad people run out, okay? Okay. Meng Meng's eyes lit up. Then, Secretary Liu turned his head slowly and looked at Director Nan, whose facial expression was a little frozen. Chapter 577, General Zhang, you go first. Quick march. Seeing that it wasn't a joke, Director Nan raised his arms seriously and ran away with his soldiers, depressed. Fortunately, there were not many people in the lobby of the hotel, and only the front desk and a few people around saw this scene. But this scene still refreshed these people's worldviews. The director of Linhai Public Security Bureau came here in flesh, and then the secretary, who ordered the director to run away. How could they play in this way? Among them, the most shocked was definitely Zhang Han's second uncle Rong Yong, who was working in the government office. As a small official, he could feel the most pressure brought by this position and identity gap. For example, even Director Nan was forced to leave because of the gap. At this time, Rong Yong dared not breathe. He lowered his head slightly, his eyes kept turning, and his expression was very careful. If someone noticed him, they would be amused by him. When official Rong just came here, he acted really calmly. Woo! Not only Rong Yong, but also Rong Sheng and Jia Wei were very nervous and stood in silence. Look, did they run away? Are you relieved this time? Secretary Liu looked at Meng Meng and asked gently. Yes, I'm relieved, thank you, young uncle. Meng Meng was very happy and she waved her small hand to Secretary Liu. Meng Meng was happy, and Zhang Han's mood naturally rose in a straight line. Now he was willing to chat with Secretary Liu. In fact, this simple point was also the reason why he could be the secretary of the Linhai Municipal Party Committee. It was not easy to make a special person like Zhang Han feel comfortable. At this time, Rong Sheng's mouth quivered as he looked at Secretary Liu, who was only 50 years old, and then at Meng Meng. He could not help but whisper a warning. Well, Meng Meng, you should call him Elder Uncle Liu. Why? Meng Meng was confused because she was not familiar with all the types of relatives. Ah, it's okay, children can call me whatever they like. I like children very much, let alone such a lovely little girl. Secretary Liu replied with a smile. Then he looked at his watch and said, General Zhang, you are going to have dinner, right? Then I won't disturb you as I have something to do. Later, a commissioner will come here to talk with you. But I can assure you that there will be no government personnel to disturb you again, and Miss Z. It's also our honor to have you in Linhai to attend the party. I've already told the TV station director that if Miss Z has any problems in your work, please feel free to call him. Okay, thank you, Secretary Liu. Xian smiled. Zhang Han also smiled at him, but then he looked at a red BMW A8 on the street outside the hotel. The window of the driver's seat was open, and there was a long-haired woman's head on the edge. She was wearing sunglasses, chewing gum and looking at Zhang Han. It was very unusual for a young female martial artist at Grandmaster Peak to appear here. She should be the reason why Secretary Liu came here. Maybe she's from the official department. Is she from the National Security Agency headquarters? Zhang Han had some guesses in his mind, but he was not interested in going out to talk with that woman. Obviously, she didn't want to disturb him, either. Well, Secretary Liu looked at Rong Yong. Director Rong, you are here too. I wonder what your relationship with General Zhang is. Rong Yong's body quivered. Then he looked at Secretary Liu in a daze and said, Secretary, I'm Section Chief Rong of Yilin Office in Southern District. Director Ma is in charge of our bureau. Director Ma? Secretary Liu gave him a puzzled expression. I remember that the most outstanding achievement of Yilin Office was made by you, and you were supposed to be promoted to the bureau director more than a year ago. Is there anything strange in this? Speaking of this, Secretary Liu smiled and shook his head. I'll go back and ask about it. Maybe. You will be even more tired from now on. Your ability is obvious to all, and the burden on your shoulders will be heavy. You need to have a psychological preparation for it. Hiss. Rong Yong gasped in astonishment. Half a meter in front of Secretary Liu, his face changed a little. Then, he straightened himself up and his hands were trembling in excitement. He saluted and replied, Thank you for your trust. I will work harder and contribute to the people. At this time, Rong Yong didn't realize how his post of director came into being. His usual composure and calmness were crushed by previous scenes, and he could not keep calm in front of Secretary Liu. Secretary Liu smiled and looked at Rong Yong deeply. Then he looked at Zhang Han and said with a smile, General Zhang, then I'll leave. Meng, if I have a chance, I'd like to invite you to my home. Okay. Zhang Han nodded. Goodbye, uncle. Meng waved her little hand at Secretary Liu. If this scene was seen by the local government officials, they would be shocked. Wow, what's the background of this family? Rong Yong finally sensed something unusual. Then he looked at Zhang Han in a daze. General Zhang, then his director post, how powerful and influential is he? My goodness, what kind of nephew do I have? Then he watched Secretary Liu and the other two officials turn around and leave the hotel. On the street, that beautiful woman driving a BMW A8 blew a big bubble with bubble gum. After the bubble burst open, she put on a strange smile at the corner of her mouth, rose up the window and started the car to leave. Their departure also quieted the lobby on the first floor of Peninsula Hotel. The people who stayed on the first floor looked at it in shock and disbelief. There were also one or two sentences of "damn it," which were vaguely explaining their restless minds. It's especially so for Rong Yong. He followed the crowd out of the hotel in a trance, got on the car and looked out of the window in astonishment. Even when he got off at the hotel, he didn't get back to normal. He went to the hotel subconsciously. When he got to the front door, he found that he was taking the lead. Zhang Han was following him. Hiss. Rong Yong was startled. He quickly turned to his side, lowered his head slightly, looked at Zhang Han's pants, and said politely, General Zhang, you go first. What? Rong Sheng and Jia Wei became stunned. Zhang Li's facial expression froze. Even Zhang Han's and Xian's lips trembled slightly. Second brother, you. Rong Sheng clapped his forehead and said in a very helpless tone. Didn't you have a good rest last night? Said Jia Wei. There was an atmosphere of embarrassment. Swish. Rong Yong's face turned red in an instant. I, he murmured. Fortunately, Xian was active. She covered her mouth and said with a smile, Zhang Han told me that his second uncle is quite old-fashioned, but it is proved false now. It turns out that his second uncle is also a joker. Ahem. Rong Yong followed the topic of Xian and said with a smile, yes, in front of my family, I'm not an old-fashioned person. Come on, let's go in first. Chapter 578, Dragon Spirit. After being taken to the reserved room by the waiter, Rong Yong didn't go in right away. He went to the bathroom first. Once there, instead of going to the toilet, he turned on the tap and placed his hands in the water. Then he began to wash his face. The water was a little cold, but it served to refresh his mind. Woo. Rong Yong looked up at himself in the mirror and exhaled a long breath. It's not a dream. Han is a general in his 20s. I rocketed to the position of bureau director because of him. It's unbelievable. Rong Yong knew that it had already been decided, since Secretary Liu spoke so straightforwardly in front of him. Obviously, it's all because of Zhang Han. I've come back to my senses, but it's even weirder this way. Rong Yong took out a piece of tissue to wipe the water on his face and hands. He gave himself one last look in the mirror, adding a smile and a headshake. Then he walked back to the room. After opening the door, he found that the atmosphere inside was very good. All the people were talking and laughing. Second brother, why did you stay in the bathroom for so long? We were waiting for you to come here and say a few opening words, Rong Sheng said. Rong Jiaxin also added, my second brother just loves to talk in front of the audience. Rong Yong, with a wry smile, replied, it's unnecessary for me to say anything. I was surprised and almost stunned by Han's decision. Second uncle, you don't need to pay much attention to the status and so on, said Xian with a smile. In fact, everyone could see that Rong Yong had been shaken, otherwise he wouldn't have done such a thing at the door. He looked better at the moment. Well, okay. Rong Yong went inside and sat down, smiling and nodding. Well, Papa is a general. Meng Meng looked at Rong Yong and pouted. Although it sounded like Meng Meng was reminding Rong Yong, it was actually Meng Meng who thought this grandfather liked her father because he liked the position of general. Ha ha ha, yes, your father is a great general. Rong Yong gave her a rare smile, and then he asked Zhang Han with curiosity, Han, how did you become a general? You're really young. I'm really curious about this. Of course, you don't have to tell me if there's any secret information involved. Nothing can't be said. Zhang Han shook his head slightly. I can help the military train some excellent talents, so they gave me the title of general as an attempt to win me over. Okay. Rong Yong was even more shocked. What kind of achievements can directly earn him the title of general? To train some outstanding talents for the military? There's no doubt that he's training the kind of backbone talents. It's amazing. Rong Yong had a deep admiration for Zhang Han. Then Rong Yong sorted out his mind and picked up the liquor cup in front of him. He planned to have a drink and say a few words before the dishes were served. Seeing him raise his glass, others raised their own glasses or drank their cups out of politeness. Even Meng Meng was slightly stunned. She put out her hands as others did. Grasping the cup in front of her, she blinked her big eyes and thought, why did they raise their drinks without drinking them? Well, I'll say a few words. Rong Yong cleared his throat. He didn't intend to talk nonsense. Instead, he said slowly according to his thoughts, first of all, my brother and I didn't pay much attention to Han and Li. After all, we are distant relatives and had no contact for many years. Even if we were close relatives, we would have become strangers if we didn't keep in touch for a long time. It was true, before Zhang Han went to Linhai, he was just a stranger in his uncle's eyes. Second, I would like to explain the reason for the first point. At that time, 90% of the Rong family members didn't agree with Jiali and Guangyu's marriage. Han, Li, it wasn't because your mother was not popular in Rong clan back then. On the contrary, she was too popular. I once heard from my father that Zhang Wengyu's enemy was so fierce that the whole Rong family and the Zhang family in Shangjing were unqualified to compete. Although I don't know if what he mentioned was the martial arts world, the older generation could see it clearly. It would be like sending Jiali into a trap if she married your father. At this time, Zhang Han was silent. He could imagine that. Of course, some people in the big family thought that benefits outweighed love. Although their Zhang family was strong, there were many similar big families in Linhai. Rong Yong smiled and shook his head, but your parents' love broke all obstacles. Jiali and Guangyu really loved each other, so my brother and I supported them in private at that time. Because of this, Jiali had a dispute with many people in our family, those who didn't admit your parents' marriage because they didn't want to get into trouble. Third point, my eldest brother Sheng, third sister Jiali, youngest sister Jiaxin and I, the four of us have the same parents, just like you and Li, and you can feel it, we are relatives because of Jiali, therefore, we came here specially to see you today, but we didn't expect that you would give us such a big surprise. You are very promising, very powerful, you are now a general. Rong Yong made a gesture of appreciation to Zhang Han and said repeatedly, you are really great. If Guang Yu and Jiali knew it, they would be very happy. At the same time, I got a promotion because of you, and thanks to that I'm very close to the bureau chief now. At this time Wang Ming snickered. Rong Yong was just told one of Zhang Han's identities. He would be shocked if he knew that Zhang Han was also a director in Hong Kong and a martial arts master who was nearly invincible in the world. How can I say this, Han, Li and Xian, I'm very surprised and scared. Haha, this first toast is for you. It's not easy for you to have such achievements. Rong Yong raised the wine cup in his hand. Cheers. The others raised their cups and glasses. Those who drank white wine took a sip, while those with soft drinks drank more. Rong Sheng took a sip of wine, smiled and wanted to say something else. Then he heard Meng Meng's voice. Papa, when do we start eating? Meng Meng is hungry. Swish. Everyone turned their gazes at Meng Meng, who sat between Zhang Han and Xian. She was looking up at Zhang Han beside her, although her voice was very faint. She was heard by everyone present because no one else had spoken just then. Haha, we'll have dinner soon. Rong Sheng said with a smile. I'll hurry them up and let them serve our dishes first. I also want to go to the bathroom. After Rong Sheng left the room, Jia Wei looked at Xian and said, Yan, would you like to go to our house today after dinner? I want to ask you how to use cosmetics. Your skin is the best I have ever seen. Really? In fact, my skin was not so good before. The women began talking about skincare products, facial masks, skincare and so on, soon discovering that they were all experts in the field. Zhang Han accompanied Rong Yong and Rong Sheng for a chat, and the dishes were soon brought to the table one after another. It seemed that the restaurant had many specialties. Although the ingredients of those dishes were not as good as those of Mount New Moon in terms of quality and taste, they were local specialties that Zhang Han and his family would like to experience. During the meal, Meng Meng wanted to go to the bathroom. Xian put on her sunglasses and took Meng Meng's little hand to leave the dining table. Zhang Han also got up to follow them and accompany them closely. The toilets were divided into men's and women's sides. Zhang Han waited in the external bathroom. Just as he was washing his hands, something strange happened. When Zhang Han looked up, clatter! Suddenly, a flame-like ray of light was quickly spread around in the mirror. In just a second, a vivid fire phoenix appeared in the mirror. Zhang Han looked at the phoenix quietly and then turned away. He waited at the door for more than 10 seconds. Xian and Meng Meng came out moments after. Then they washed their hands and returned to the room. As they reached the door of the room, Zhang Han's brain suddenly registered a sound, stopping his footsteps. Go ahead, I have to talk with someone. Zhang Han patted Xian on the back. Xian looked at Zhang Han and nodded. Papa, come back quickly. That was what Meng Meng had to say whenever Zhang Han left her side. Okay, I'll be back soon. Zhang Han touched Meng Meng's head and smiled. After Xian and Meng Meng entered the room, Zhang Han turned and walked to the corridor on the side of the restaurant. The restaurant was located on the 36th floor, which was also the top floor of the building. At the window, Zhang Han's body flashed, as if turning into light, and then he jumped out. There was a small tower on upper layer of the top floor, tens of meters high, with a small round platform. A woman with a ponytail was sitting at the edge of the platform. She was wearing a leather suit, her lips were extremely red and she was smoking a thin cigarette. She was enjoying the night view of Lin Hai at the moment. Whoosh! Zhang Han's figure appeared near the back of the woman. Hiss, woo. The woman took a smoke and slowly said, there is a little-known martial arts world under the cover of the bustling city. In fact, There were still some reports about martial artists and various relevant events, but in such environment, they all became stories with unclear authenticity or supernatural miracles. Zhang Han slightly frowned. Before Zhang Han could raise his question, the woman turned her head and curled her red lips in an arc. I know your time is limited, you have to take care of your daughter. She turned and sat down facing Zhang Han. She was the woman who drove a BMW A8 outside the Peninsula Hotel. She had a good figure, looking buxom in her tight leather jacket. Zhang Han, nice to meet you. I'm Jiang Yanlan, the leader of the Million Bird Team, a detachment of Dragon Spirit. You can call me Leader Jiang, or directly call me Million Bird. Okay. Zhang Han nodded. What is Dragon Spirit? Dragon Spirit is the top of the National Security Agency and the real core of the Hua Nation Defenders. It is because of Dragon Spirit that all those worldlets, and the whole martial arts world remain peaceful. Jiang Yanlan smiled and said, there are 4 detachments in Dragon Spirit Action Office, and they were named after the 4 divine beasts, among which. Don't tell me the details. Zhang Han shook his hand, showing that he was not interested in it. Jiang Yanlan was surprised. Chapter 579. Beat them as you like. Aren't you curious about us? Jiang Yanlan raised her slender eyebrows slightly, but she soon became calm again. Yes, you only care about your family, which is one of the reasons why many members of Dragon Spirit admire you. There are not many people who can live like you. But I come here with a task, and you have to spend a few minutes on it. Jiang Yanlan was really worried that Zhang Han would reject her. At the same time, she was thinking about another thing. Is Zhang Han Yang not interested in other women? Although I'm not as beautiful as Xian, I'm better than Xian in terms of sexuality. Even in this case, he still thinks it's a waste of time to talk to me. Humphrey. While Jiang Yanlan was silently complaining about Zhang Han, she kept speaking in a calm voice. Even if you still have something to do, it was me who negotiated with Secretary Liu. I asked him to help you out the dilemma. Could you spare me a few minutes since I helped you? Just say it. Zhang Han nodded. Her help was really worth the minutes, and Zhang Han wanted to hear what her so-called task was. There are many departments in Dragon Spirit, and we Action Office are in charge of carrying out all kinds of secret tasks with high difficulty. We spend most of the time overseas, and I've just returned from there with our boss. He is Yi Danlang. Have you heard of him? It is not boastful to say that he is almost invincible in the martial arts world, though it is said that there are currently no martial artists at the Divine Realm stage or above. I know someone at the God State stage, and most at their level are doing close-door cultivation. When the gate of the small world is opened, Divine Realm martial artists will be no longer rare. Our boss is very optimistic about you, and he especially called to tell me something about you. What I'll tell you is our boss's suggestion. When it came to this, Jiang Yanlan turned a little more serious and threw out the cigarette in her right hand. Half of the smoke made an arc on the front side, but it turned into a cluster of flames after flying for more than 10 meters. Then Jiang Yanlan stood up. At such an altitude, hundreds of meters from the ground, the wind was slightly shaking her ponytail. She said, there is a department in Dragon Spirit called the Guardian, and its members are called Guardian Elders. They are usually guarding in various places when there are no important issues to be dealt with, and they will be specially notified if they have a task. The rights of the Guardian Elders are superior to those of the National Security Agency's director. They also enjoy great privileges. In particular, they have access to all the treasures in Dragon Spirit. Our department has investigated you, and it's Elder Wang who recommended you to be a Guardian Elder in Hong Kong. Are you interested? Zhang Han shook his head. I'm now one of the directors in Hong Kong, and I don't want to accept another appointment. As a director, Zhang Han was at the top level of the Hong Kong National Security Agency. If he joined Dragon Spirit and got to its top level, he would have to assist Dragon Spirit in the future, even though it seemed that there were not many tasks for him at the moment. Besides, when the gate of the world was opened, The Guardian Department would not be as influential and powerful as it was at the moment, and Zhang Han would surely be very busy. What Zhang Han wanted to do was to bring back his parents, accompany Meng Meng and cultivate in peace. Moreover, Tan was serving for the Hong Kong National Security Agency as a director, and Zhang Han was actually an honorary director, who didn't need to do anything practical. Zhang Han felt relaxed with the arrangement. He didn't want any further development in his career. Jiang Yanlan smiled in disappointment and didn't say more to persuade him. After all, Yi Danlang's intention to recruit Zhang Han was not that strong. Jiang Yanlan concluded, "Okay, I finished my task." She knew that Yi Danlang just wanted her to convey this idea. It would all depend on Zhang Han Yang. Although Zhang Han Yang was powerful, he was not so important in Yi Danlang's eyes. "I know what happened between you and the Ge family. The Ge family has been more and more unbridled in the past 2 years, so you can deal with this matter as you like. We won't interfere as long as you don't make a big trouble out of it. But I'd like to give you a piece of advice since I'm not optimistic about you. You killed the Ge brothers, Ge Shizhen, the director of Lin Hai, and several of their helpers, who were all closely related with the Ge family. I'm afraid they won't forgive you, even if Ge Donglai doesn't care about them. He will challenge you for the dignity of the Ge family, and you may not be as powerful as him. You'd better be careful." "I see." Zhang Han smiled casually and replied, "That's great. I'm interested in his Roaring Flame Saber." The Roaring Flame Saber, known as a 5th stage spirit treasure and a divine weapon, attracted Zhang Han because of its auxiliary function. Although Zhang Han didn't know much about saber skills, he could exchange other useful treasures with the saber in the Spirit Treasure Pavilion. Besides, Uy, no action immortal, was said to be the owner of the Spirit Treasure Pavilion, which was interesting. Ha ha ha. Jiang Yanlan smiled. "Who is not interested in divine weapons? Director Zhang, I'm not joking. Ge Donglai is very close to the divine realm now. He hasn't reached the divine realm yet?" Zhang Han looked into the distance and said slowly, "I'm not afraid of him even if he were at the divine realm already." If Zhang Han was still at the middle stage of building base, he would have no idea how to deal with Ge Donglai. However, he was currently at the foundation late stage, and both the T-Wood Thunder and those clouds above his soul sense sea would help him. Jiang Yanlan's mouth quivered slightly. She didn't know how to reply to him. "You are so arrogant." After thinking about the possible consequences, she gave up making such a comment. She checked the time and noticed that 3 minutes had already passed. She said, "I know something you may be interested with. Would you like to listen to me?" After that, she waited for 3 seconds, but Zhang Han ignored her. She snorted and said without hesitation, "A Class B relic was found in England, Europe, 2 days ago, and tens of martial arts masters were sent there. They met the man in bamboo hat, a fierce man, and half of them were killed. The man in bamboo hat found a divine object in that relic, but we don't know what it is. There's another thing, the cursed boat appeared again. It came out from the Bone Cave in Indonesia. The last time it appeared in Singapore, it was 516 meters long, 348 meters tall and 197 meters wide, but this time, it's 660 meters long, 280 meters wide and 390 meters tall. It's growing, and that's terrifying. My boss Yi Tanlang warned us that we can't touch it. It has not entered the sea from Indonesia. It only floated on the upper layer, very fast, to the center of the Bermuda Triangle, and then it disappeared." Jiang Yanlan said seriously and slowly, "It's said that the cursed boat appeared thousands of years ago. It has been seen several times throughout the years, and some people call it the ghost ship, but all the martial artists who've seen it know that it's a cursed ship that can't be touched. Now, it's beginning to appear more frequently, and I'm afraid that something bad will happen. No one had ever seen it twice in 100 years before, but it appeared twice in a few months recently." "I see," Zhang Han replied. That cursed boat was weird and even Zhang Han himself didn't dare to bother it before he reached the stage of innateness. "Do you know Uy?" Zhang Han asked. "Yes." Jiang Yanlan nodded. He is the chief of the Standby sect in Xihang. I'm sorry, but I forget the official name of his sect. Do you know the Spirit Treasure Pavilion? Zhang Han asked again. The Spirit Treasure Pavilion is a mysterious store, and Boss Yi Danlang said that no action immortal is a special and powerful man. Jiang Yanlan replied, do you think UI is no action immortal? The Hua nation is large and there are many people with the same name, let alone similar names. Zhang Han's smile froze. He doubted that UI was no action immortal. If it were true, he must have many spirit treasures, and Zhang Han could exchange some spirit treasures with him without resorting to force. But he didn't have enough information about the Spirit Treasure Pavilion, and he had to wait until it was opened again. I'm going back. Zhang Han had nothing more to ask, so he said goodbye to Jiang Yanlan and left the platform. Jiang Yanlan sighed and shook her head, then she sat down again, lit a cigarette and took a deep breath. Zhang Han, Yang and Gudonglai, it would be shocking if they do fight. The others were still chatting when Zhang Han returned to the room. At night, they left the restaurant and made an appointment to go out the next day. They planned to have dinner with the Wang family after Xian finished her program in the next evening. Zhang Han went back to the hotel with his family. He told stories to Meng and then fell asleep as usual. It was a quiet night. The next morning, after breakfast, Xian and Meng began changing clothes in preparation for the day's trip. Although both the mother and daughter were beautiful, they still liked to dress up. What was Zhang Han doing? At the time, Ahu, Liu Jiren, Zhao Feng, Elder Meng and around 7 more people were in the reception room. Ahu and Liu Jiren stood in front of Zhang Han. Gulp. Ahu swallowed his saliva and said nervously, Boss, Chairman Liu will come here in 1 hour. What can I do? Zhao Feng and Elder Meng could barely keep the smiles off of their faces. You and Miss Liu have had a good time these days. Why do you only feel nervous when her father is back? When Chairman Liu comes back, of course you should go to the airport to meet him in person, said Zhang Han with a smile. Yes, I should pick him up. Shall I go to the airport directly? I'm afraid that Chairman Liu will beat me. Ahu whispered. It's okay, I'm here and you needn't worry about anything. If my father beats you, I will stop him. Liu Jiren said it with great confidence at the beginning, but her tone gradually weakened. She also knew that her father would be furious if he suddenly knew about it. I will call Chairman Liu later, you can head there directly. Zhang Han nodded. Okay, let's go now. Ahu made up his mind. He took Liu Jiren's hand and walked out. Shall we go with you? Zhao Feng said. No. Ahu waved his hand and left with Liu Jiren. Zhang Han pondered, then he took out his mobile phone in front of everyone and dialed Liu Qingfeng's number. Zhao Feng and the others thought that Zhang Han would say something to help Ahu, to talk about how promising a man he was, and that perhaps he could be Miss Liu's boyfriend, but they didn't expect that Zhang Han's words were totally different from what they had imagined. They were stunned even at the moment Zhang Han dialed Chairman Liu. Zhang Han said, Chairman Liu, well, I'm sorry, but I have to tell something in advance. Ahu is now your daughter's boyfriend. I just found out about it. It's terrible and you must punish him without asking for my opinion. It's not a serious matter for me, so you can beat him as you like. Chapter 580, 4 no and 2 yes. After hearing Zhang Han's words, Zhao Feng, Elder Meng and Leng's expressions obviously changed. Their eyes were widely opened. Wow, our boss begins to be cruel to his men. He's so scary. Zhao Feng, who was very close to Zhang Han, heard a cry from his mobile phone. What? 2 fuzzy words came out of the mobile phone, and then the phone was hung up. Chairman Liu seemed to be going crazy. Zhang Han slightly shook his head. He also had a daughter. He would sink the man's body into the Huangpu River if he were Liu Qingfeng. Some words were hard to say, and Zhang Han decided to let Chairman Liu make his own decision. If Chairman Liu was reckless, he would punish Ahu through all kinds of means after hearing Zhang Han's words. But Liu Qingfeng was clever and he knew what Zhang Han wanted to tell him through the call. That was, Zhang Han knew it and wanted him to give the young couple a chance, but Zhang Han himself didn't want to get involved in the affair. It was all up to Chairman Liu. Zhang Han knew from Liu Qingfeng's reply that he was surprised at the news and had almost lost his mind. "That's it. I've done all I could do. Ahoo, you'd better pray for yourself." Zhang Han shook his head. Zhao Feng and the others soon realized what Zhang Han was doing. Ha ha ha. Zhao Feng took the lead to laugh. The others all burst out laughing. "Ahoo will suffer a lot," Elder Meng joked. Although they were pretending to sympathize with Ahoo, they all knew that this was Ahoo's good luck as long as he took the opportunity. After making a few jokes, Zhao Feng and the others went back to their rooms. Zhang Han would be going out with his family and some relatives from the Wrong family that day, so they didn't need to accompany them. After a few minutes, Rong Sheng, Jia Wei and Rong Yong arrived with Wang Yan and Rong Han, Rong Yong's daughter. Rong Han was 1 year younger than Zhang Li. She was a slightly introverted girl, which had something to do with living in a single-parent family since she was 11. Brother Rong Han was as modest as his father. After greeting everyone politely, she and Wang Yan went to play with Meng Meng. After sitting for a few minutes, they went downstairs and out the door. They had planned to go to Yu Garden that day, a classical garden in a large tourist area. It was located in the northeast of the old town in Linhai, adjacent to the town god's temple. The scenery there was refreshing, and this time they wanted to taste town god temple's snacks. There were fewer people than usual in Linhai during the spring festival. It was very suitable time for someone like Xian to travel, because she could be more relaxed. However, although the number of tourists was much lower, a few pieces of news had ignited the whole martial arts world of Linhai City. Gu Peng and Gu Shuai, two of Patriarch Gu's sons, were killed by Zhang Han Yang. Gu Shizhen, the director of Linhai City National Security Agency, and the other 6 helpers were also killed by Zhang Han Yang with just one move. At about 5 o'clock that afternoon, there was a 100-meter-long blade reflection over Mount Donglai where the Gu family lived. It contained a terrifying power that sent several signals to many people. Zhang Han Yang, merciless Zhang, was in Linhai at the moment and had killed several members of the Gu family. Gu Donglai was annoyed and there might be a shocking battle between them. Hearing the news, the whole martial arts world in Linhai were in a state of uproar. Zhang Han Yang is amazing. How could he kill so many core members of the Gu family as soon as he arrived in Linhai? Even including the director of the National Security Agency. He's so fierce. The blade light above Mount Donglai is a terrible sign. Who will win the battle, Zhang Han Yang or Gu Donglai? One is the new king of martial arts, and the other is the strongest of the older generation. If they really fight, it would be like Mars hitting the earth. Zhang Han Yang has killed all his enemies since became famous. I heard that he suppressed Gai Xingkong not long ago, using the demon dancing sword to block the dragon tiger spear, a divine weapon. North Tiger Gai Xingkong is also a strong elder like Gu Donglai, and they both have divine weapons, so maybe Zhang Han Yang can suppress Gu Donglai and win this amazing battle. I don't think so. Even if Zhang Han Yang suppressed Gai Xingkong may be better than him in a real battle. As for Gu Donglai, he was as powerful as Gai Xingkong, who is very close to the divine realm stage. Besides, both his roaring flame saber and saber skills will help him in the battle with Zhang Han Yang. Many voices were heard from all over the place. Everyone was concerned about it, and they didn't expect such a big event to happen at the end of the year. There were more than half of the voices supporting Gu Donglai. Zhang Han Yang keeps looking for fights everywhere. Do you really think he is invincible? How long has he been famous? How dare he challenge Grandmaster Gu in a hurry? What an arrogant man. Maybe they will have their last battle in Linhai. They didn't believe in those titles like Invincible Grandmaster. After all, things might be exaggerated after they were passed on. However, Gu Donglai was a real super strong man with numerous achievements and fame, at home and abroad, who had killed countless talents with his saber. Naturally, he had a large number of supporters. Zhang Han had just become famous, There were too many people who didn't know what his specific strength was. Seeing is better than hearing. Sometimes it made sense. But if the main court was changed to Xiangjiang, more than 90% of the martial artists would support Zhang Han. Unfortunately, this kind of support was useless. It was just like chatting after dinner. All in all, the matter had become the most concerning thing in the martial arts world at present, but whether the battle would break out was not certain. Zhang Han Yang was known as Merciless Zhang, who was unafraid of anyone. As for Gadong Glai, he hadn't fought against others in a long time, and the death of the Ge brothers was not enough to provoke him. It was Gu Shizhen's death that he was concerned with. Many people thought it was a pity that Gu Shizhen died. He was promoted to be the director of Lin Hai's National Security Agency 1 year ago, and it was astonishing that he was finally killed by a colleague. His fearlessness made him provoke Merciless Zhang. Zhang Han didn't know what the others commented about his deeds. He was strolling in the Yu Garden with his family. The garden was designed in an ancient style, and when Meng Meng saw the buildings, she said happily, "We are here again, Papa and Mama. Are we going to see bad guys being caught by the ancients?" Xian smiled when she heard Meng Meng's words. "No, you're talking about the costume show we saw in Xihang. We are now at the Yu Garden, in Lin Hai, and they don't have that kind of performances here. But we can see some other interesting things." Hearing Xian's words, Rong Han and the others understood what Meng Meng meant. It turned out that Meng Meng was talking about the Song City in Xihang. They felt they had traveled to the ancient times as they walked in the Yu Garden. Jia Wei smiled at Meng Meng and said, "The Yu Garden was built in the Ming dynasty. It has a long history. The scenery is completely different, depending if it's day or night. The lights on the building at night are very beautiful. Let's go to other places to play this afternoon, and I'll bring you here in the evening after 2 days." "Thank you, Grandma," Meng Meng replied. "So lovely." Jia Wei and Rong Sheng smiled and looked at Meng Meng. There was love in their eyes. When Zhang Han and his family were enjoying themselves at Lin Hai International Airport, while next to the Long Lincoln in the middle of a series of luxury motorcades in the parking lot, Ahu was sitting and sweating nervously. Liu Jiren was sitting next to him, and she shared the feeling. Liu Qingfing was in front of them. His face was pale, and the blood vessels on his forehead could be seen clearly. At the moment, the motorcade was moving slowly outwards. Liu Qingfing turned his head, looked at the driver and shouted, "What are you doing? Who allowed you to move the car? Stop!" Hiss. His words scared 5 people present except Liu Qingfing himself, including Liu Qingfing's bodyguards. Ahu's hand slightly quivered. At this time, he was really afraid, but he had a sense of responsibility. With great courage, he looked at Liu Qingfing and said, "Chairman Liu, you should blamed me for this. I didn't do my bodyguard's duty well and I'm going a bit too far. I'm ashamed, but I'm sincere to Miss Liu. I dare swear to you." Originally, he wanted to ease the atmosphere, but Liu Qingfing became even more furious. He clapped the armrest of the seat hard and said in a loud voice, "What did you say? Have you done something?" Seeing Liu Qingfing's expression, Ahu's face shrunk and he hurriedly said, "No, I dare not do anything without Chairman Liu's permission." Ahu felt a little guilty. In the past 2 days, he and Miss Liu had kissed more than 10 times. Even his hands had uncontrollably touched Miss Liu many times. According to this development, they would definitely do something in a few days. Of course, the premise of all this was that Liu Qingfing would ignore them, but how could he ignore them? Ahu's reply made Liu Qingfing feel a little better. Liu Jiren bit her lips. "Dad. What are you doing? Can't you speak calmly?" "You want me to be calm, Liu Jiren? Tell me, how old are you?" "I'm 22. Can't I fall in love by now? You married my mom when you were 22, right? If I lived in the countryside, maybe I would be a mother by now." Liu Jiren complained, looking at her father's face. What Liu Jiren said was true and Liu Qingfing didn't know how to reply, but anyway, he was still angry. Because of the girl's words, Liu Qingfing thought of Liu Jiren's mother. He was lost in old memories for a while and felt sad. Hu took the opportunity to say, "Uncle Liu, I'm serious. Dad, I really like Hu. You can't be a roadblock in the face of your daughter's happiness, can you? And my boss also said that without Uncle Liu's consent, I can't deepen my relationship with Miss Liu." Hu ended mentioning Zhang Han. Hu knew that Zhang Han was influential and even Liu Qingfing respected him, otherwise, Hu would be kicked out of the car if Zhang Han was not his boss. Liu Qingfing suddenly fell into silence. He lowered his head slightly, he took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, lit one, and looked out the window. A minute later, after smoking the cigarette, Liu Qingfing snorted coldly. He looked at Hu and Liu Jiren. "You can't do anything further before getting married. You can't kiss or hug each other in front of me. You can't stay out." Liu Qingfing thought about it and added, "You can hold hands and go out to deepen your understanding of each other. As for the rest of the precautions, I'll tell you when I have any other ideas. Hu, I haven't forgiven you and you'd better be careful. Even if Zhang Han supports you, I will not give in when it comes to my daughter. What's more, Zhang Han told me that I can beat you if I want to.